The movie opens in the ocean as a woman's body plunges into the water, her eyes snapping open in panic. Suddenly, Brandon jolts awake, realizing it was just a nightmare. He's a bodyguard for Governor's daughter, Ava, and is haunted by guilt for failing to protect her mother. At the airport, Ava greets her friends, Jed and Kyle, for their trip. The boys are less than thrilled about Brandon's presence, but Ava explains her dad insists on security. Once on the plane, Ava and the guys settle in the back, noting the unusual lack of passengers. Shortly after takeoff, the plane experiences some minor turbulence, which is brushed off as normal. However, things quickly escalate when the plane shakes violently again and the engine starts to heat up. The pilot reassures the passengers, saying they hit some birds and that there's nothing to worry about. But soon after, one of the engines catches fire. The pilot urges everyone to fasten their seatbelts. Fear grips the passengers when part of the engine breaks off and smashes into the side of the plane, killing a passenger instantly. The impact causes a sudden pressure change, and chaos erupts inside the cabin. Bags tumble from the overhead compartments, hitting passengers, and those who haven't buckled up are hurled across the plane, despite their desperate attempts to hold onto others. Moments later, a section of the plane's wall blows out, creating a massive hole. People are sucked out of the plane. Brandon tries to save a floating man, but the wind is too strong, and the man is ripped away. Another man clings to his seat, but the metal frame gives way, and he is sent plunging into the void along with the seats. A flight attendant, attempting to save another passenger, is pulled out of the plane as well. With most of the passengers gone, the plane nosedives, plummeting toward the ocean at terrifying speed. When it crashes, the impact is brutal, water floods the plane instantly, and debris flies everywhere. Brandon is impaled by a piece of metal as the impact crushes rows of passengers when the seats are slammed forward by the force. The nightmare continues as the plane fills with water, trapping the few survivors inside. The plane sinks for several minutes before coming to rest on the seabed, wedged at an angle that creates an air pocket in the back of the plane. Ava, her friends, and flight attendant Danilo are alive, but Kyle has a broken arm. The eerie sounds of the ocean surrounding them make the group nervous. Suddenly, Brandon emerges, bringing Rosa and her unconscious grandmother, Marty, to the safe area. Danilo begins chest compressions on Marty. She regains consciousness. Rosa anxiously asks about her grandfather, and Brandon delivers the heartbreaking news that he didn't survive. Panic begins to spread, but Brandon quickly takes charge, calming everyone down and reminding them that the air pocket means they are safe for now. Ava checks her phone for a signal, but there's none this deep underwater. She suggests they swim out through the hole in the plane, but Brandon explains that it's too dangerous and they should wait for rescue. Danilo adds that the pilots likely sent out a distress call before the crash, so help should arrive soon. To prepare for emergencies, Brandon suggests checking for backup oxygen tanks. Danilo finds 2 tanks in the back of the plane, but they're empty. Just then, Marty recalls that one of the passengers had a medical oxygen tank. Brandon volunteers to search for it, and before he leaves, Marty asks him to also retrieve her husband's hat. Brandon dives into the water and swims through the wreckage, passing by the bodies of passengers still strapped in their seats as he searches for the oxygen tank. Brandon finds Marty's husband's hat and grabs it, unaware that something is swimming by the window. Suddenly, he's attacked by a shark that slips in through the hole in the plane. The shark bites into Brandon, who struggles to fight it off. Back in the air pocket, the group sees ripples in the water, signaling that something is happening. Just as suddenly, the ripples stop, and Brandon resurfaces, bleeding heavily from multiple wounds. He warns the group to stay back and hands over the oxygen tank and Marty's hat before apologizing to Ava. Brandon is yanked back into the water, and the group watches in horror as the shark's tail breaks the surface while it devours him. The group retreats to the employees' area, agreeing to follow Brandon's advice to wait for rescue. Marty offers to treat Kyle's broken arm, explaining that she was a nurse during the war, and that's how she met her husband. Kyle screams in pain as Marty resets his bone, using magazines and bandages to fashion a makeshift splint. A helicopter searches the ocean, prioritizing the mission since the governor's daughter is among the missing. However, they fail to spot anything for now. Back with the survivors, the plane creaks ominously and shifts, threatening to fall deeper at any moment. Jed begins to lose hope, and Danilo opens the oxygen tank that Brandon had risked his life to retrieve. The survivors notice the water turning red, signaling that the sharks have entered the plane to feast on the drowned bodies. The aircraft shakes as the sharks swim past their window, colliding with various parts of the plane. Rosa grows increasingly frightened, and Ava tries to comfort her, assuring her that help is on the way. Meanwhile, the helicopter still hasn't spotted anything and is running low on fuel. The group monitors the water level and estimates they have about 3 or 4 hours before it reaches the back of the plane. They hear creaking metal and see water seeping from the ceiling, raising doubts about how long the structure can hold. Suddenly, the plane shifts and starts sliding down, causing rocks to tumble off until it gets stuck again. Thankfully, everyone manages to hold on, but the new angle accelerates the water rise inside the cabin. Realizing the seabed isn't as stable as they thought, the group agrees they must swim out of the plane. They brainstorm ways to distract the sharks, and Rosa recalls that sharks don't like bubbles. However, the challenge remains of holding their breath long enough. Cal then remembers that some passengers had scuba gear. Danilo informs them that the equipment is located in the baggage hold and that there's a hatch to access it, but warns that the oxygen tanks are likely empty, as they wouldn't have been allowed on board otherwise. Ava suggests that even if the oxygen tanks are empty, the rest of the scuba equipment might still help. But Jed remains pessimistic, so Ava excuses herself, claiming she needs to use the bathroom. She has a brief breakdown. When she emerges, she reassures Rosa that it's okay to feel scared. Meanwhile, the helicopter outside has only 15 minutes of fuel left. The search crew finally spots floating debris from the plane, and 2 divers are sent into the water to investigate. The divers soon find the sunken plane, and as they approach, the survivors inside wave desperately at the window. One diver swims toward the hole, while the other reassures the group by signaling through the window. The shark appears behind the diver, unnoticed at first. The group frantically gestures to warn him, but when he turns around, it's too late. The shark attacks, pulling the diver down and killing him. The survivors watch in horror as the diver's leg floats past the window. They assume the second diver has also been killed when no one else appears in the corridor. With the helicopter nearly out of fuel, the crew above has no choice but to leave, though they've recorded the plane's coordinates, and backup is on its way. Inside the plane, Ava proposes that if the second diver is dead, they might retrieve his oxygen tank. She peers into the water and notices a shadow, but can't confirm if it's the diver. Jed, trying to get a better view, stands on the seats but slips and falls into the water. At first, he surfaces laughing, revealing it was just a prank. But his laughter quickly turns to terror as a shark finds him, sinking its teeth into his body. The group rushes to help him, managing to pull him back to safety. Tragically, they discover Jed has lost a leg. Marty quickly takes Rosa behind a curtain and uses seatbelts to create a tourniquet, stopping the bleeding. Jed, heartbroken, laments that he'll never be able to participate in triathlons again. Ava volunteers to search for the scuba equipment. Danilo opens the hatch to reveal the baggage hold is flooded, but Ava dives in undeterred. Using a flare, she searches through the luggage, unaware that something else is swimming behind the bags. As she finds the scuba gear, she's startled by an octopus at the same moment her flare goes out, leaving her in darkness. The group grows anxious without seeing any light from the flare, but soon Ava resurfaces with the equipment. Inside the bags, they find diving suits and masks, only 4 in total. They hear something hitting the plane. They rush to the window but find no diver, realizing it must have been a shark. When they turn around, they discover Jed has died. Ava desperately tries to perform chest compressions, but Marty gently pulls her back. At that moment, the plane shifts and slides again. This time, it stops abruptly as the cockpit breaks off and acts as an anchor, but water begins flooding the cabin even faster. Knowing they're running out of time, they decide they must leave now. Recalling Rosa's fact about sharks disliking bubbles, they come up with a plan to use the small oxygen canisters from the emergency masks to create bubbles as a distraction. Kyle breaks down, confessing he's a bad swimmer due to a traumatic childhood accident, but with encouraging words from Ava and Rosa, he agrees to try. Ava then gathers as many oxygen masks as she can without diving too deep into the water, all while the sharks continue hitting the plane. Above them, the ceiling begins to crack under the pressure. The group starts changing into the scuba gear, with Marty selflessly volunteering to go without a suit, saying she would slow them down due to her age. After saying a final goodbye to Jed, the survivors enter the water, aware the plane is starting to slide again. The cockpit fully breaks off and falls into the abyss. Marty urges Ava to go first and take Rosa with her. The girls swim through the corridor but quickly encounter a shark blocking their path. Thinking fast, they open an oxygen canister to release bubbles, scaring the shark away. Once the path is clear, they continue on, with Kyle and Danilo following close behind. Marty stays back, watching the young ones swim to safety as the water inside the plane rises. Accepting her fate, meanwhile, Kyle panics and swims back toward the small remaining air pocket. Danilo tries to help him, but a shark suddenly emerges from the baggage hold and attacks Kyle, devouring him in seconds. Horrified, Danilo escapes and rejoins Rosa and Ava. The three survivors find the dead diver and take his oxygen tank. Ava sends Rosa and Danilo ahead through the hole with the tank, but just as she is about to follow them, a shark appears. Ava swims back and freezes as the shark swims past her, not noticing her presence. Its tail knocks her mask off. She quickly starts swimming toward the front of the plane. The plane begins to fall faster, and the increasing water pressure makes it difficult for Ava to move. She manages to escape through the front hole just as the plane sinks into the abyss. Now free, Ava begins swimming toward the surface but soon runs out of air and passes out. Her body naturally floats upward, and as soon as she reaches the surface, she takes a breath and wakes up in a panic. She looks around and doesn't see the others. Just then, helicopters appear and pull her out of the water. Danilo and Rosa have already been rescued, and Rosa asks about her grandmother. Ava, with a heavy heart, delivers the tragic news. As a final farewell to her grandparents, Rosa throws her cherished plushie into the ocean before falling asleep in Ava's arms, both survivors finally safe.